So I started thinking about this topic because I feel like a lot of the conversation around AI in fashion so far has been about whether it should be adopted for a specific field in the industry, but not whether it actually can. And in thinking about this, I basically started to try find an area of fashion that felt too human for a computer to be able to take over it, or too random for it to be able to quantify, which eventually got me thinking about some of the trends we've seen this season and how some of them seemingly came out of absolutely nothing. And then I saw this reel from Data But Make It Fashion on Instagram that made everything click.
Many fashion trends these days actually happen because of unpredictable events outside of fashion altogether. Like how Miguel Rojas hitting a winning home run for the Dodgers while wearing a Van Cleef & Arpels Alhambra necklace
increased search traffic for the brand by nearly 140%.
Or how two of the world's biggest musicians, Karol G and Taylor Swift,
both released orange album covers just within 5 months of each other,
heavily pushing orange to the forefront of consumers' minds. Or how the US stock market plunged after the US announced its global trade tariffs,
which ushered in a wave of more muted, simple, recession core fashion.
So that's the premise of the video, and I kind of want to expand on it today. Not only because I think it's a really interesting subject, but because I think it's going to be a divisive topic in the next few years. And the reactions I got on Instagram when I posted a story about this asking for people's thoughts kind of prove that. Okay, before we get into this, welcome back to the channel. My name's Katie. I talk about fashion and consumerism through the lens of sustainability, social media, and we have a lot of fun here. I'd absolutely love it if you could follow the channel if you enjoy this video and come say hi on my other social medias. And with that, let's get into it. So my kind of hypothesis for this video, and taking inspiration from Data But Make It Fashion's content, is that yes, you can have predictable or manufactured trends in the industry that AI can most likely predict. But some of the best or most authentic or lasting trends in the industry have started from one thing that was entirely too random for a computer to be able to predict. For example, a manufactured trend might be something that brands are pushing through influencer and celebrity collabs, like the Dior saddlebag, or I've said it before, but the resurgence of Coach we're seeing. And an example of a predictable fashion trend might be something that's based on cyclical data patterns, like indie sleaze being back right now because we've seen the resurgence of the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and this is just the next wave of nostalgia. Whereas something that's entirely too random and therefore unpredictable might have started from something like a trending audio on TikTok that just blew up, or any kind of internet meme, or maybe because it's a natural reaction to something that just happened in the world. Or maybe it's something that happened entirely out of the fashion industry, influencing what we're wearing now. And these are the kind of trends that I want to focus on for this video and talk about whether AI could predict them. But first, maybe we should go through some examples of those unpredictable trends that we've seen in recent years. Like, as Data But Make It Fashion's reel mentioned, things like the color orange trending because of pop culture outside of fashion, the Van Cleef & Arpels resurgence because of a sports moment. I have my own list of things that I think fit under this too. Like, okay, the trench coat button to the top meme that came out of a trending TikTok audio that came out of someone meeting Lily Rose Depp randomly on the street.
Trench coat button to the top and these ballerina ass slippers.
That literally turned into a meme that put the fashion girlies on TikTok in a chokehold with their wardrobes for a good while this year. Like, I'd love to see AI try to predict that pattern of events before it happened. Also, the Kendall Jenner tank top trend that just came out of one celebrity visiting a basketball game and absolutely blew up on TikTok. Maybe, yes, we could have predicted the tank top trend, but who could have predicted that her specific style she was wearing would be the thing that became the face of the trend and sold out? I think maybe the strongest example of this, because of how fashion reacted to it, was the Loewe tomato clutch meme that happened because one person decided to hold up a picture of a stunning tomato on Twitter and caption it, "Why does this look like a Loewe tomato?" To which the brand responded by making a bag that looked exactly like that tomato. Like I said, for me, one of the most powerful examples of this. But finally, I think a future trend prediction that's come out of a reaction to something and therefore maybe not predictable for AI, which is the reaction that happened to the announcement of the color of the year for 2026 being a shade of white and the social media response to that, particularly the people who responded to it by saying that our act of resistance for 2026 should be wearing bold colors. And this also kind of touches on something I want to talk about later in the video, human reactions and AI, because I do think it's going to be an influencing factor to the answer of whether AI can ever predict fashion. But okay, to start even answering a question like that, I feel like we have to deep dive into the world of trend prediction and analysis in order to understand what it is AI has to do. So let's talk about how trend predicting works in fashion. More specifically, long-term trend predicting. I say this because of how easy it is to short-term predict fashion trends. We can guess what's going to be trending for 2026 right now because a lot of them will be based on what the fashion girlies, the cool girlies online are wearing right now and seeing that trickle down into the mainstream in the next few months. For example, those military button jackets or the funky hat trend is on everyone's 2026 trend predictions, but if you look at what the fashion girlies have been wearing, those have been in their wardrobes for the last 6 months at least. I don't want to focus on what's going to be trending in the next few months. I want to think about the next few years. Because how do you even go about predicting what we're going to be talking about, loving, reacting to in several years' time? And more importantly, for this video at least, how that's going to mirror in our wardrobes. Well, WGSN, a platform whose literal business is built around predicting things years in advance with a self-reported accuracy of 90% plus, apparently has this broken down into an exact science. What this says to me is that the idea of trend predicting, truly predicting, rather than just spotting early trends, is about looking at data points, socioeconomic trends, and a whole host of other references completely outside of fashion, and then interpreting that into the effect it's going to have on our wardrobes at a later date, which makes complete sense to me, and trends that we've seen this year certainly fit into this bracket. For example, the lipstick index that everyone was talking about earlier this summer that relates to the economy going down and women wanting a little treat for themselves when big ticket items seem like too much, so they'll buy into lipstick. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like the full picture, and I feel like something's missing in this data-driven approach to trend predicting. And I think this is where we split from predictable trends, manufactured trends, into those unpredictable, reactive trends. Because the true art of trend predicting, and the thing that sets apart some creators who see just early indications from predictors who have scarily accurate ideas about scarily niche trends, is that they rely on things other than data points. They have an ability to tap into the pulse of the culture and the mood of society and forecast how that's going to play out short and long term. And one of my favorite predictors who I think actually does this scarily accurately is fashunadict on TikTok. And I wanted to hear Inyana's thoughts on how she does this.
In the fashion industry, like, we don't work a year in advance, we work 2 years in advance. So that's really where the trend prediction comes in, because you have to make sure that product is going to be sold in 2 years when you're making it 2 years before the environment is even prepared for it and the consumer mind is even ready to adopt it. It really comes into, on a really maybe micro level, like what colors will people be wearing? What are the silhouettes they'll be enjoying? And on a more macro level, like looking basically, I think, a lot at nostalgia. So what are people feeling most nostalgic for? Trends are nostalgic for the people that did not get to take part in them. For Gen Z, like in the 2010s, it was kind of, you were very, very young, and then all your idols maybe were like the ones that were wearing the trends, and you couldn't obviously participate. And then also you don't have that memory of that cringe moment. Like the 80s are also trickling back, but then the people that actually went through the 80s are like, this is the worst fashion decade era. We don't want to see this come back. This is ugly. But for the people that weren't able to take part, they derive that sense, of nostalgia from it. And they're like, this is something interesting and new. That's kind of where that nostalgia comes from.
One of Inyana's videos is talking about trend predictions for the next 2-3 years, talking about what's going to be trending in 2027, 2028. And she predicts that our clothes are going to be starting to prepare us for natural disasters in this time period, which I argue is already coming true as we're starting to see this through the Gorpcore trend. But the reasoning she gave as to how she got to this trend seems so complex, so understanding of human emotions and human reactions. I wanted to ask her whether she thought AI could have predicted it.
I have mixed feelings about AI's capabilities. What I think is that generative AI, so the AI that probably me and you have access to, like ChatGPT, Gemini, like large language models, they cannot. I tried to prompt, I was like, let's just see. I was like, okay, ChatGPT, what do you think is going to? And it just pulled up the most generic trends that several Vogue, the Cut articles have already quoted. But there are different AI models being developed. So huge companies have their own AIs that they have access to that are more capable at actually interpreting data. They're called predictive AIs. Their whole purpose is to predict trends so they can serve those industries and those industries can act accordingly based on their advice. And I think perhaps these companies have the access to those AIs that can really interpret data. And I think that can help us to make more accurate predictions. But I also feel like trend forecasting is part intuitive. It requires being part of society. It requires observation with your own eyes and being present and also being human.
I think we have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to trend predicting, which is social media. One photo of a celebrity at a sporting event can completely derail the carefully planned trend predictions for the fashion industry for the entire summer. So we kind of have to talk about the impact that has on trend predicting. Before we had TikTok, before we had any social media, we were much more dependent on the fashion industry to tell us what to wear. And this democratization of trends and fashion content has almost split the industry, I'd argue, into two opposing camps with two opposing forces going on. One of these clashes is marketing versus authenticity online, shaping the basis for trends and therefore trend predicting. Like I said, social media has democratized fashion to the point where it's no longer clear who makes a trend. And maybe in that, there's an idea that AI can successfully predict marketed trends that trickle down from fashion brands to consumers, but not the ones that come from consumers and trickle up into the fashion industry, since these are inherently more organic, unpredictable, inspired by what's happening right then versus what the industry thought was going to be happening 2-3 years ago. And obviously that list of examples I gave earlier in the video of trickle up trends that seemed unpredictable all kind of fit this narrative really well. But I think a clash we haven't really spoken about yet in this video is the idea of fashion as an art form versus a consumptive habit, and how that impacts trend predicting. I saw this comment on Data But Make It Fashion's reel about AI trend predicting that argued artificial intelligence can't take over because, like it says in the name, it's too artificial. But this idea that fashion is not artificial is where I kind of find a bump in the road, because I'd argue that a lot of fashion has become artificial as it's devolved into simply trends and overconsumption. I mean, Shein's supply chain is built off an artificial intelligence model that successfully predicts what consumers are going to want so that they can reduce waste. And if we look at it from that lens, it's kind of already proven that artificial intelligence can predict what we're going to want to shop, if shopping is the primary goal of fashion, that is. But if we're talking about fashion as a form of self-expression, the argument that AI can't tap into that still holds. And I think it's interesting, the paradox there. I'm very interested in the question about whether AI could have predicted the lack of trends this season. Because on one hand, we know it can understand basic principles like trend cycles and the idea that things will go in and out of fashion. There'll always be a bell-shaped curve with things. And therefore, having reached the peak of trends a couple of years ago, we were naturally going to start declining into trend fatigue and, yes, maybe have a couple of seasons where no one defining trend took over. But would AI have been able to understand the human emotions behind this drive that maybe caused it to decline a little bit quicker than we were expecting? Because only last year we had a summer filled with brat, and everyone was absolutely loving having a theme of the summer. There was so much enthusiasm for that aesthetic. And then this summer, it all just up and vanished really, really quickly. I think AI would have probably expected a slower decline. But if humans are one thing, it's unpredictable. And I think it's the same for trends that come out of human emotion rather than logic or data. I actually asked Inyana's opinion about this for the Loewe tomato clutch, and I really liked what she had to say to explain it.
I think no. The Loewe tomato is a feeling. Brand feelings are emotive. And I don't think AI is emotive. I don't think it has that capability on new and upcoming things that are based on feelings and individual creativity. I think that's left to the individual alone, and you can only observe that if you're in that certain space. And I don't think AI has the capability of perceiving that.
I guess we're asking the question, does AI have any depth of understanding? And it kind of goes back to the concept of TikTok trend predictions for the next season of fashion versus an industry built off understanding what we're going to be wearing in 2-3 years. Like, for example, everyone knows there's normally a print of the season, but what that print is the actual nuance you want from a fashion trend prediction. Macro trends are so much easier to predict than micro trends. And I don't think AI has enough understanding to deliver the substance needed for a micro trend or something truly on the pulse point. If you were to provide ChatGPT or Gemini with all the information it needed to make a successful prediction, like downloading the entire contents of TikTok, economic data, the average income of young people today, the cultural outlook going on right now, and asked it to take these data points and then give you a trend prediction, it would come up with something a lot more thoughtful than if you just outright asked it what's going to come up next year. Obviously, that's a lot of work, and ideally you need something that can go out and retrieve all of that data itself, understand it, reliably interpret it, and come back to you with a thoughtful answer. That's where the money would be in AI trend predicting, and that's what fashion and other industries are trying to build. And in some cases, this is already sort of a reality. In WGSN's case, it uses a lot of AI to trend predict. But what it does is use quantitative data analyzed by AI and merges that with qualitative data from their expert industry insiders who have gone out into the real world and tried to understand the cultural pulse. And this blend of AI and expert is used a lot in other industry trend predictors too. I actually couldn't find any that were purely AI. And I think that says a lot about the state of AI trend predicting right now. When I was analyzing some of these AI trend predictors that currently exist on the market, one thing that really struck me was the lack of substance that a lot of them had behind their reasoning for trend predictions. I kind of want to leave WGSN out of it, but I did find another company that did relatively the same thing, except the trend predictions they had on their website for 2026 were so devoid of cultural understanding about why these things were trending. To be fair, a lot of the trend predictions were very specific. It wasn't just there's going to be a print for the season. It was zebra and Dalmatian are going to be trending for the season. But zero explanation as to why these things are trending, why they reflect the culture, why people are gravitating towards zebra print and Dalmatian print at this exact moment in time. It's got some compelling data points to back it up, but there's little to no humanness in these explanations and predictions, which I think is a massive limitation. Even despite knowing that there are very advanced models out there that are successfully combining AI usage with experts, I can't help but wonder if these teams could still have predicted something like the Marie Antoinette resurgence we saw this year. And that's because I don't think the trend had one logical explanation behind it. Maybe, yes, we would do a Marie Antoinette nostalgia resurgence, and fashion's love affair with her as an icon has influenced us into thinking about her more in 2025. Or maybe it was an organic thing brought up by this let them eat cake mentality that has been spreading throughout our culture otherwise, and we're seeing in other avenues of fashion and industries, regardless of whether the figurehead of it is Marie Antoinette. And I kind of say this and think of the cigarette smoking resurgence we're seeing in fashion, and how a lot of people thought that the explanation for this was that people have almost given up on the future and they want an outlet. It comes back to that idea of human emotion versus data, and whether fashion is about self-expression or whether it's just about cyclical trends and consumerism. But maybe most importantly, and kind of the final thought I want to have for this video, regardless of whether AI can eventually successfully trend predict or not, what would the reaction to an AI trend prediction be? Would the very fact that AI has predicted a trend that's even seemingly random, unpredictable, get in the way of it coming true because of the human reaction to a manufactured, unmanufactured trend. And someone actually explained this thought much better in my Instagram group chat by saying, I think if AI can predict fashion trends, there will be a counter trend movement of doing the exact opposite of what the AI fashion trend prediction was. And yeah, with that, I feel like we've brought to an end this video essay without a very strong conclusion as to whether AI can trend predict or not, which I think is kind of symbolic of the entire issue, because regardless of whether AI has the capabilities, the human aspect of whether we will accept those capabilities is going to define the outcome. So I'll leave you with that, I guess. Thank you so much to fashionAdict for talking to me for this video. I'm going to be releasing our full interview on the Refashion podcast, so make sure you listen to that. It was so interesting and she had so many great answers I couldn't squeeze in here. And make sure you're following me on all my socials. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this, and I'll speak to you very, very soon. Have a lovely day, besties. Bye.